June 6, 1944. The cliffs of Normandy loomed large as Sergeant Thomas Wilkins of the British 3rd Infantry Division clutched his Lee-Enfield rifle, a weapon design dating back to 1895, and prepared for the hellish advance inland. The salt-laden air filled his nostrils as waves crashed against the landing craft. At 27, Wilkins had already seen combat in North Africa and Sicily, where his trusted SMLE Mk3 had never once failed him despite the punishing conditions of desert sand and Mediterranean humidity. German soldiers awaited with their sleek Mauser Kar 98K rifles and cutting-edge MG-42 machine guns, confident that their technologically superior Wehrmacht would repel the invasion with ruthless efficiency. Oberleutnant Friedrich Steiner of the 352nd Infantry Division had assured his men that morning that the Allies' outdated equipment would be no match for German engineering excellence, a belief reinforced by years of propaganda that celebrated Aryan technical superiority. They had no idea that the seemingly antiquated British rifle in Wilkins' hands would prove more devastating in actual combat than their own celebrated engineering marvels. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the tale of how an outdated British rifle outperformed Germany's modern weapons on the battlefield, and how this microcosm of military technology would reveal deeper truths about the war itself. That practical functionality often trumps theoretical perfection, and that the realities of combat rarely match the sterile calculations of weapons designers. The morning fog hung heavy over the training fields of Aldershot, England, in early 1940. Captain James Harrison watched with a critical eye as new recruits fumbled with their short-magazine Lee-Enfield rifles, the SMLE Mk3 that had been the backbone of British forces since before the First World War. At 42, Harrison was a veteran of both the Western Front and the interwar colonial campaigns in India and Africa. The scar across his left cheek, earned at Passchendaele in 1917, twitched slightly as he observed the trainees. A German Mauser Kar 98K sat on the table beside him, captured during the British Expeditionary Forces retreat from Dunkirk. The weapon had been sent to various training centers as part of an effort to familiarize British soldiers with enemy equipment. "Gather round," Harrison called, his voice carrying the weight of combat experience. The young soldiers formed a semicircle around him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. Many had been civilians just weeks before, shop clerks, factory workers, and university students now thrust into the brutal machinery of modern warfare. "This," Harrison said, holding up the Lee-Enfield, "is what Jerry's propaganda calls an obsolete relic. And this," he continued, lifting the Mauser, "is what they call the pinnacle of rifle engineering." He placed both rifles side by side. "Today, you'll learn why we're damn lucky to have our outdated SMLE." Among the recruits stood Private Edward Collins, a university engineering student before the war who studied the German rifle with particular interest. His wire-rimmed glasses and slender build made him look more suited to a laboratory than a battlefield, but his keen intellect had already marked him for potential officer training. "Sir, the Mauser does have superior machining," he noted. "The tolerances are tighter, and the bolt mechanism is more precise. The German metallurgy appears exceptional." Harrison smiled. "Quite right, Collins. The Mauser is a beautiful piece of engineering, and in a laboratory, it might be the superior weapon." He picked up the Lee-Enfield again, running his hand along the worn wood stock that had seen thousands of training rounds fired through it. But wars aren't fought in laboratories. They're fought in mud and rain and snow and desert heat. They're fought by men with trembling hands and pounding hearts who haven't slept in 36 hours. Under those conditions, our Lee-Enfield has proven itself time and again. He handed the rifle to Collins, who examined it with a craftsman's appreciation. The SMLE Mk3 had entered service in 1907 as a refinement of earlier Lee-Enfield designs. Its distinctive features included a 10-round detachable box magazine, a cock-on-closing bolt action, and a rear-locking lug system that many continental European designers had dismissed as less robust than their forward-locking systems. "The Germans think their engineering is superior," Harrison continued, addressing the entire group. "And by some measures, it is. But their weapons are designed for ideal conditions, while ours are designed for war as it actually is, chaotic, dirty, and unpredictable. In a German training facility near Bremen, a parallel scene was unfolding. Hauptmann Werner Müller, a decorated veteran of the Polish campaign, addressed a group of fresh recruits. At 36, Müller embodied the professional German officer, ramrod straight posture, immaculately maintained uniform, and unwavering confidence in the Reich's military superiority. The training facility was a model of efficiency, with precisely arranged equipment and detailed technical diagrams adorning the walls. Production statistics displayed prominently showed Germany's industrial output of various weapon systems, carefully curated to emphasize growth while obscuring shortfalls. The Mauser Kar 98K is the finest bolt-action rifle ever created, he stated with unmistakable pride, holding the polished weapon before them. Its design had evolved from the Gür 98, introduced in 1898, and represented decades of refinement by German gunsmiths. 5 rounds, accurate to 500 meters in the hands of a properly trained soldier. The 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge delivers superior ballistic performance compared to the British .303, with a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second. Its superiority over enemy rifles is undisputed. Unteroffizier Klaus Hoffmann, who had fought in France, nodded in agreement. A former toolmaker from Dusseldorf, Hoffmann appreciated the precision engineering that went into each Mauser. The Wehrmacht's rapid victories had only reinforced their belief in German technological supremacy. The Reich's propaganda regularly featured the Mauser as a symbol of German engineering excellence, alongside Messerschmitt fighters and panzer tanks. The British still use their Great War rifles, Müller continued, producing a captured Lee Enfield. He handled it with obvious disdain, as though touching something unclean. Crude by comparison, with loose tolerances and outdated design features. Note the magazine, unnecessarily large and projecting from the bottom of the rifle, creating potential for damage and malfunction. The British cock-on closing bolt action sacrifices precision for a marginal increase in firing rate. Their stubborn refusal to modernize their small arms will cost them dearly. The recruits examined both rifles, their faces reflecting the certainty of victory that had been instilled in them by years of propaganda. One young soldier, Hans Weber, a former hunting guide from Bavaria, noted the Mauser's more elegant lines and superior finish. The craftsmanship is clearly superior, Herr Hauptmann. Indeed, Müller replied. German industry produces approximately 25,000 Kar 98K rifles each month, each one a testament to our superior engineering and manufacturing capabilities. While the British may boast of higher production numbers for their Lee Enfield, quantity cannot compensate for quality. What neither the German officers nor their men understood was that the very features they criticized as outdated or crude were actually deliberate design choices that would give British infantrymen crucial advantages in the chaos of actual combat. The unnecessary 10-round magazine would prove vital in firefights where sustained firepower often meant the difference between victory and death. The imprecise, loose tolerances would allow the Lee Enfield to function reliably in conditions that would cause the Mauser to jam. And the marginal increase in firing rate would translate to British infantry sections delivering double the volume of fire of their German counterparts in the critical opening seconds of an engagement. Back in Aldershot, Captain Harrison was demonstrating the rapid-fire capability of the Lee Enfield. He shouldered the rifle and fired 10 aimed shots in rapid succession, the empty brass cases ejecting smoothly with each operation of the bolt. 15 rounds per minute is the standard, Harrison explained, but a skilled rifleman can achieve 25 to 30 without losing significant accuracy. We call it the mad minute. He nodded toward Private Collins. The loose tolerances you mentioned? They're why this rifle continues to function when it's caked with mud or subjected to the freezing cold of a European winter. Collins approached and examined the rifle. The magazine holds 10 rounds, he observed, compared to the Mauser's 5. Precisely, Harrison replied. And our rifle is cock-on closing, while the Mauser cocks on opening. Seems a small distinction, but it means our action is smoother and faster in repeated fire. When your life depends on putting rounds downrange quickly, these details matter. In North Africa, November 1941, the theoretical advantages of the SMLE were put to the brutal test of desert warfare. Operation Crusader pitted British forces against Rommel's Afrika Korps in the scorching Libyan desert, where temperatures soared to 50 degrees Celsius by day and plummeted near freezing at night, and fine sand worked its way into every piece of equipment. The desert environment was perhaps the most challenging test possible for any mechanical device. Fine particles infiltrated every crevice, oil evaporated quickly, and metal surfaces expanded and contracted dramatically with temperature shifts. Corporal David Atkins of the 7th Armored Division, the famed Desert Rats, huddled behind the burned-out hull of a German Panzer III tank. At 25, Atkins had been a mechanic in civilian life, giving him an appreciation for how machinery performed under stress. The tank had been knocked out during the previous day's engagement, its crew either dead or captured. Now it provided vital cover for Atkins and his 4 remaining squad mates. His unit had been separated during a German counterattack, and now 5 of them were pinned down by sniper fire from a ridge 300 meters away. Their radio operator had been killed in the initial ambush, leaving them isolated with dwindling ammunition and water supplies. "They've got us zeroed in," muttered Lance Corporal Wilson beside him, a former postal worker from Manchester whose usually cheerful demeanor had been replaced by grim determination. Sand coated his face, mixing with sweat to form a grimy mask. "That's a proper marksman up there." Atkins nodded grimly. The precision fire had already wounded their lieutenant, who lay semi-conscious behind them, his shoulder bandaged with a field dressing now stained brown with both blood and sand. "German rifle squad, I'd wager. Probably with scoped Mausers." He peered cautiously around the tank's shattered track. "There, see that small outcropping? I can make out at least 3 helmets." Wilson grimaced. "Bloody perfect spot for an ambush. They must have watched us coming for miles in this open terrain." Atkins checked his Lee Enfield, brushing away the sand that coated its exterior. Despite the harsh conditions, the rifle's action remained smooth. He'd maintained it religiously, following the desert warfare modifications suggested by armory sergeants with North African experience: minimum oil, frequent cleaning, and keeping the bolt covered whenever possible. The SMLE's loose tolerances, once criticized by precision-minded engineers, were proving to be a lifesaver in these conditions. "Cover me on 3. I need to get to that dune for a better angle." Wilson looked skeptical. "That's 50 yards of open ground, Dave. And staying here is certain death once they bring up reinforcements," Atkins replied, checking the 10-round magazine was fully loaded and ensuring he had 3 more in his ammunition pouches. "The lieutenant needs medical attention soon, or he won't make it till nightfall." When the moment came, Atkins sprinted for the dune as Wilson and the others provided covering fire. The German position responded immediately, rounds kicking up sand at Atkins' heels, the distinctive crack of Mauser rifles echoing across the desert. He dove behind the dune, his uniform now a darker shade of khaki from sweat and sand. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands remained steady, the product of countless hours of weapons training. From his new position, Atkins could see the German squad more clearly. 5 men, just as he'd suspected, with one using a scoped Mauser rifle. The others had standard Kar 98 KS. Unlike British units, which distributed automatic weapons liberally through infantry sections, this German squad relied primarily on bolt-action rifles, with perhaps a single MP-40 submachine gun for the squad leader. He took a deep breath, settled his sights on the sniper, and began the methodical rhythm British soldiers had drilled into muscle memory. Aim, fire, work the bolt. Aim, fire, work the bolt. The first shot struck the German sniper, the 174 grain .303 British round delivering devastating energy at that range. Before the others could fully react, Atkins had fired 4 more rounds, dropping 2 more soldiers. The remaining Germans, now aware of the threat, directed their fire toward Atkins' position. But the German Mausers, with their 5-round capacity, needed reloading. In that brief window, Atkins fired 5 more rounds from his 10-round magazine. When the brief firefight ended, all 5 Germans were casualties. Atkins had fired 15 aimed shots in under a minute, the famous Mad Minute in action. The German Mausers, with their slower bolt action and smaller magazines, had been decisively outmatched in this critical moment. Production statistics and engineering tolerances had meant nothing in this brutal equation of survival. Only the practical ability to deliver accurate fire quickly had mattered. As Wilson and the others joined him, Atkins examined one of the captured German rifles. "Beautiful workmanship," he admitted, running his finger along its machined surface. "But too bloody slow when it matters." Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Feldwebel Ernst Wagner of the Sixth Army was facing very different conditions in the bitter Russian winter of 1942. Outside Stalingrad, as temperatures plunged to -30 degrees Celsius, many German weapons began to malfunction. The bolts frozen again, cursed Private Mueller, struggling with his Mauser Kar 98K. The precision machine parts, with their tight tolerances, were seizing up in the extreme cold. Wagner nodded grimly. "Use your body heat. Sleep with the bolt assembly next to your skin if you have to." He'd seen this problem repeatedly since the winter began. The German Ordnance Department had never designed the Mauser for Russian winter conditions. A week later, during a Soviet counterattack, Wagner witnessed the consequences of these design limitations firsthand. As T-34 tanks supported a Russian infantry assault on their position, several of his men found their rifles inoperable at the critical moment. The tight-fitting parts had either frozen solid or were jammed with ice crystals that formed from their own breath in the frigid air. The few captured British Lee Enfields the unit possessed, however, continued to function. Their deliberately loose tolerances allowed operation even when partially iced over. This small detail, a design choice rather than a manufacturing limitation, was making the difference between life and death. By June 1944, as Allied forces established their foothold in Normandy, Sergeant Thomas Wilkins' unit advanced inland through the French hedgerows. The brutal fighting in this terrain favored the defender, with German forces using their MG-42 machine guns to devastating effect along predetermined fields of fire. During one advance toward the village of St. Lo, Wilkins' section came under heavy fire from a German position hidden in a farmhouse. The distinctive sound of the MG-42, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw for its 1-200 rounds per minute rate of fire, sent the men diving for cover behind a stone wall. "We need to flank that position," Wilkins shouted to Corporal Jenkins beside him. "They've got the road covered perfectly." Jenkins nodded. "I'll take Lewis and Parker around through that orchard. If we can get behind them, we might stand a chance." As the small team maneuvered through the orchard, they encountered a German patrol, 3 men moving to reinforce the farmhouse position. The Germans spotted them simultaneously, and both groups opened fire. The critical difference came down to firepower. The 3 British soldiers, each armed with a Lee Enfield, delivered 30 aimed rounds in the first crucial seconds of the engagement. The German patrol, with their 5-round Mausers, managed only 15 shots before needing to reload. When the brief, violent encounter ended, 2 Germans lay dead and 1 wounded. Jenkins had taken a round through his left arm, but remained combat effective. The British soldiers secured their prisoner and continued their flanking maneuver. "Why do you British still use such old rifles?" the wounded German asked as Jenkins bandaged his shoulder. "Our Mausers are much more modern." Jenkins tightened the bandage. "Modern doesn't always mean better, mate. Especially not in this business." The captured German soldier was Gefreiter Hans Schmidt, a 20-year-old draftee from Munich. When interviewed later at a field hospital by intelligence officers, his observations provided valuable insights into German perceptions of Allied equipment. "We were told your weapons were inferior," Schmidt explained. "Our instructors said the British refused to modernize because of tradition and stubbornness." He shook his head. "But after facing your infantry, many of us wished for rifles that could fire as rapidly as yours." In the chaos of battle, the ability to maintain constant fire proved more important than the theoretical accuracy of our weapons. British intelligence officers heard similar statements from other prisoners. What German propaganda had dismissed as outdated was, in fact, better suited to the realities of infantry combat. The Lee Enfield's 10-round magazine, smoother bolt operation, and more reliable function in adverse conditions were proving decisive advantages. In December 1944, during the Ardennes Offensive, better known as the Battle of the Bulge, these differences would again be highlighted in the snow-covered forests of Belgium. As temperatures dropped and visibility worsened, weapons reliability became paramount. Captain Edward Collins, promoted from the private we met earlier, now commanded a company of the British 6th Airborne Division deployed to reinforce American positions. His engineering background and intimate knowledge of both British and German small arms had made him a valuable asset in training new troops. Clean your rifles thoroughly, but don't overoil them, he instructed his men as they prepared defensive positions. In this cold, excess oil will congeal and cause stoppages. The good news is our Lee Enfields will tolerate these conditions better than the German weapons. When the German assault came through the pre-dawn mist, Collins' company faced elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Youth fanatics with excellent training but dwindling supplies. The fighting was chaotic, often at ranges under 100 meters in the foggy forest. During one German rush, Collins witnessed a textbook demonstration of the Lee Enfield's combat advantages. A section of his men, pinned down behind fallen trees, engaged a German squad attempting to outflank them. In the crucial opening seconds, the British section's combined firepower, over 50 rounds without reloading, stopped the German advance cold. Later examination of the battlefield revealed a telling detail. Many of the German casualties were found with partially disassembled rifles, clear evidence they had been attempting to clear malfunctions when they were hit. The extreme cold had played havoc with the precision-engineered German weapons. By early 1945, as Allied forces pushed into Germany itself, the material realities of the war had become undeniable to German troops. The mythology of German technical superiority, a cornerstone of Nazi propaganda, was crumbling in the face of actual battlefield experience. Hauptmann Werner Müller, whom we met earlier as an instructor, now commanded a depleted company defending a small town near Cologne. The once proud officer had seen his certainties eroded by years of brutal combat. Gather any weapons you can find, he instructed his men as they prepared for yet another Allied attack. British rifles, American rifles, they're all preferable to our own at this point. His executive officer looked shocked. Sir, surely our German weapons. Müller cut him off. This isn't about patriotism anymore, Karl. This is about survival. The Lee Enfield functions better in these conditions, has twice the magazine capacity, and can be operated faster. He gestured to a captured British rifle he now carried himself. 4 years of war has taught me to value function over form. The pretty engravings on a Mauser won't save your life when it jams. The evolution in Müller's thinking reflected a broader realization among German combat veterans. While German propaganda had celebrated the precision engineering of their weapons, actual combat revealed that reliability, simplicity, and practical features mattered more than theoretical performance specifications. The Lee Enfield rifle embodied a different philosophy of design, one that prioritized real-world performance over laboratory perfection. Its loose tolerances, which German engineers might have considered sloppy, allowed it to function in mud, dust, extreme cold, and tropical heat. Its 10-round magazine doubled the firepower of the Mauser. Its cock-on closing bolt action permitted faster follow-up shots. These features weren't accidents or manufacturing compromises. They were deliberate design choices by British ordnance officers who understood the realities of infantry combat. The SMLE had been refined through decades of colonial warfare across the British Empire, facing every possible climate and condition. This institutional knowledge had been incorporated into a weapon that emphasized practical reliability over theoretical perfection. In May 1945, as the war in Europe ended, British ordnance officers conducted a comprehensive evaluation of captured German weapons. Their findings, compiled in a classified report, confirmed what frontline troops had already discovered through bitter experience. The German Mauser Kar 98K represents excellent engineering and manufacturing, the report noted. Under ideal conditions, it may achieve marginally superior accuracy. However, in actual combat conditions, the SMLE Mk3 demonstrated superior reliability, higher sustained fire rate, and greater practical effectiveness. The report included interviews with veterans like Sergeant Thomas Wilkins, who had carried the Lee Enfield from Normandy to Germany. "The rifle never let me down," Wilkins stated. "Not in the rain, not in the cold, not when it was fouled with mud. I could fire 20 aimed shots in a minute, and that made all the difference in more firefights than I can count." Statistics supported these subjective assessments. British infantry sections, with their Lee Enfields, could deliver over 120 aimed rounds per minute. Equivalent German units managed less than 60 with their Mausers. In the critical opening seconds of an engagement, this disparity often determined the outcome. The SMLE's superiority extended beyond its mechanical features. The British Army's training emphasized rapid, accurate fire rather than extreme precision at long ranges. The average British infantryman received extensive practice in the mad minute technique, conditioning them to maintain controlled, rapid fire under stress. "We spent hours practicing working the bolt without taking the rifle from our shoulder," recalled Corporal David Atkins of the Desert Rats. "It became pure muscle memory. Even when exhausted or under fire, we could maintain that rhythm. Aim, fire, bolt, aim, fire, bolt." This integration of weapon design and training doctrine multiplied the SMLE's effectiveness. By contrast, German infantry training emphasized precision marksmanship at the expense of rapid-fire techniques. When faced with the chaotic reality of modern combat, where engagements were typically brief and at ranges under 300 meters, this doctrinal difference proved significant. The story of the Lee Enfield versus the Mauser reflects a larger truth about World War II. The conflict was not ultimately decided by which side had the best weapons in a theoretical sense, but by which had the most appropriate weapons for the actual conditions of combat, produced in sufficient quantities and supported by realistic training and tactics. In this respect, the humble Lee Enfield, a rifle that first entered service when Queen Victoria still reigned, embodied the pragmatic British approach to warfare. It wasn't the most beautiful weapon, nor the most accurate at extreme ranges, nor the most innovative in design, but it was durable, reliable, and lethal in the hands of a trained soldier. After the war, Private Edward Collins, now Captain Collins, returned to his engineering studies and eventually joined the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield. His combat experience with both British and German weapons provided valuable insights as Britain developed new infantry arms for the post-war era. The lesson of the SMLE wasn't that older designs are inherently superior, Collins explained to colleagues in 1946. Rather, it taught us that practical combat effectiveness trumps theoretical performance. A rifle that functions perfectly in laboratory conditions but fails in mud or extreme cold is ultimately useless. A weapon must be designed for the worst conditions it will face, not the best. This philosophy would influence British small arms design for decades to come. Even as bolt-action rifles were superseded by self-loading designs, the emphasis on reliability, practical features, and real-world performance remained. For German weapon designers, the war provided different but equally valuable lessons. The pursuit of engineering perfection had produced weapons of undeniable quality, but often at the expense of practical combat effectiveness and ease of mass production. Post-war German firearms would strike a better balance between precision engineering and battlefield practicality. In the decades following World War II, as military historians analyzed the conflict in detail, the reputation of the Lee Enfield continued to grow. What had once been dismissed as an outdated relic was increasingly recognized as one of history's most successful military rifles, a weapon whose design philosophy prioritized the features that actually mattered in combat. The SMLE story offers a broader lesson about technology and warfare. The best technology isn't necessarily the most advanced or the most precisely engineered. Rather, it's the technology that best addresses the actual challenges users will face, that can be produced in sufficient quantities, and that remains functional under the worst possible conditions. This principle extends far beyond rifles. Throughout World War II, German engineers created technically superior tanks, aircraft, and submarines. Yet these advantages were often negated by reliability issues, maintenance difficulties, and production inefficiencies. By contrast, Allied equipment, while sometimes less impressive on paper, proved more reliable in the field and could be manufactured in overwhelming numbers. Sergeant Thomas Wilkins never forgot the Lee Enfield that had carried him through the war. Like many veterans, he developed a deep attachment to the weapon that had saved his life countless times. It wasn't the prettiest rifle, he would tell his grandchildren years later, but it was the one you wanted when your life depended on it. The Germans had these beautiful Mausers with their perfect machining, but in the mud and snow and chaos, our outdated Lee Enfields kept firing when their weapons failed. The Lee Enfield rifle would go on to become one of the longest-serving military firearms in history, remaining in official service with some armies into the 21st century, a testament to the enduring value of its design philosophy. Its success story reminds us that in warfare, as in many fields, theoretical perfection often matters less than practical effectiveness. In museums where these historic rifles rest side by side in quiet reverence now, the Lee Enfield sits alongside the German Mauser, both very well-respected legendary weapons from a terrible conflict. But for soldiers who carried them in battle, through mud and blood, there was no question which they preferred. The outdated British rifle had proven itself superior where it mattered most, in the hands of infantrymen facing the chaotic, brutal reality of modern warfare. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.